All right. So I'm Edwin Rwigi. I'm a Kenyan PhD student at the Global Development Institute, GDI. I am officially in my second year, starting September of this year. So I'm what 2 months old as a second year PhD. So actually, I should be saying I'm a PhD candidate. So yeah, it's an awesome thing. I'm from Kenya, born and raised and brought up in Nairobi. And yeah, I'm excited to be at GDI, to be part of Manchester. Yeah. For was it close to about 10 years, for a decade, I've been in the nonprofit civil society sector in Nairobi, in various organizations with very different, should I say, strategic thrusts. I think where I started off my career, it was more of a civil society slash activist organization, which had a very different flavor to other places I came to work at. Like by the time I was actually applying for my PhD at Manchester, I was working in a more traditional nonprofit in Nairobi, where we are adjacent to government, or we want to, I don't know, generate um, research findings or collaborate with government versus where I started from. Well, perhaps we were a little more critical or more keen on building capacity, community capacities to better engage with the government. So yeah, for about 10 or so years, starting out, I think why I started off, so I used to work for this nonprofit, which sadly no longer exists. It was called Fahamu Networks for Social Justice, and would, for the most part, would work with community organizers and activists to either provide research or to translate research that can be acted on as far as activists are concerned, or even provide capacity. Like myself, I was part of a program which was training young activists, and uh, it was sort of like a fellowship slash leadership program,
Mm.
because you find that most young activists, especially in urban spaces, their leadership will be very organic. So you get involved in maybe there's a problem area, and you figure out, you know what, I want to help my community in doing this or the other. Perhaps somebody does not have the language to articulate what is going on, as far as perhaps having a political economy analysis of what is going on, or being grounded in certain ideology. We were a very ideological organization, and that's the kind of space we're engaging. After that, I think I've done a bit of research work with research organization before now switching to uh, uh, another nonprofit called PASGA, Partnership for Social and Governance Research in Nairobi, which was very deliberate about producing research and programs for the with the sole aim of these outputs being taken up by government entities or people in places of public policy influence here. So for the most part, that has been my last decade. Before now, yeah, biting the bullet and finally saying, "Hey, let's do this PhD thing," because we love our lives so much and we want to add more stress to ourselves. That was, I think, in 2016. I was part of a program that was doing capacity training for journalists and activists to better engage, um, or rather to better participate in the China-Africa discourse. But by then it was quite robust and energized. And I remember I helped organize a conference, research conference. I think it was called the Chinese in Africa and Africans in China Research Network Conference. And in this conference, I think that's the first time I was really exposed to researchers and what they were doing, and that just blew my mind. I recall, in fact, rather listening to this anthropology student, an American Asian, talking about ethnographic work in South Africa with Chinese immigrants, and it just blew my mind. I was like, you know what, whatever she's doing, I would like to be part of that. And so I think right about then, that's when I was doing my master's program in development studies. And again, being in that space, I think it kind of opens up your mind to appreciating the kind of opportunities or career pathways one could explore. Right after that, somebody came into my life, an employer stroke supervisor, uh, to this day remains to be a really good friend and a mentor. And this is an individual who had done quite a bit of research, especially in urban informal settlements, and I was also seeing how she was translating her work into um, program work. And I thought, you know what, yes, I want to do this. So I think my interest in pursuing a PhD, before I even started at Manchester, that was in 2023, had been there for about 4 or 5 years. Then finally, I think everything aligned for me to be a Manchester. Yeah, and why Manchester? I think for the most part because of ACRC. I've always had an interest in urban informality, and I think towards the end of 2022, thereabout, I think that's when ACRC was publishing their their city report, the initial I don't know what they were called. Were they like preliminary reports, the very initial reports? I was listening to I read the Nairobi report and I listened to a YouTube interview. And by then, we were not acquainted. Alice Fadlik, who was part of ACRC, was talking about her work in Nairobi and in Korogosho. I also got the chance to read her work, and I was like, you know what, there's something interesting happening in Manchester, and yeah, if I could get there, that'll be amazing. And yeah, and here I am today. You might know, and possibly somebody who's watching this. Maybe just for context, ACRC is a humongous, super ambitious project. Was it 12 or 13 African cities? So basically, um, Eastern, Southern, and West Africa. 13 cities, 13 or is it 12 different research teams, um, with links across the continent, into Europe, UK. So it's a it's an ambitious project. Uh, so the assignment I got, or rather coming into the assignment, what I understood about ACRC and the leadership, that there was a certain push to want to explore how the team and how it implements its work can do can implement the project in an equitable, just, and should I say fair manner. And so by the time I was coming in, there was already a temperature check survey. So this was a survey to just explore what different team members felt about certain questions about ACRC's coloniality or decoloniality, and explore what could be done. So they did the survey, they had the results, and I was invited to sort of conduct a more qualitative exploration of these results. And it was I think a very meaningful exercise, even for me, uh, being brought in as a consultant to support it. And I think one of the most, possibly two of the most interesting things that I learned from that process is that people have very different visions of what decolonization is. And for such a massive project, it was interesting to see what um, what people felt would be the ideal direction that the project would take, and having and bearing in mind that this will not necessarily be the primary objective of the project, because the project is implementing research with the aim of addressing, I believe the website says, intractable challenges of African cities. So besides that, you're also thinking about how to decolonize yourself as you implement and design the project. So it's quite a whole lot to do, with a very complex and layered project. So despite all these different perspectives, there's a clear appreciation that ACRC was thinking about these things in a meaningful way. And something also observed that most of the people interviewed, especially Global South researchers, African researchers in the team. They were saying this is the first time ever had ever been invited to participate in such conversations, much as they had participated in so many other different, should I say, global or international, global North, global South consortia and projects. So that was very encouraging. So I did my report, and I know the SMT also responded to some of my recommendations, which was amazing. And I thought there were some very thoughtful responses to what the conclusions of the report were, and some of the recommendations. And I believe these have been published on the ACRC project, and anyone who would like to learn more about what ACRC is doing in this regard, they can check out one of the web pages or download the report. It's available on the website, right? So it's quite interesting how I got involved in the project to begin with. By the time I was being brought in as a consultant for the decolonization project, um, I wasn't a PhD student. I had applied for the PhD, and uh, and I was actually asked by a team member who is, I think, currently based in the Netherlands, who was like, "Hey, I was sending out cold emails looking for a PhD, and somebody said, "Hey, let me see your CV. Is this the kind of thing that you're able to sort of like work on?" And I shared past projects, and I was brought into the team. Currently, I'm involved in ACRC as a research assistant, now as a PhD student, working closely with Alice and Diana, which has been awesome. And yeah, we're doing a city of systems analysis. Basically, what we're trying to see is how formal informal interfacing occurs in the different domains. This is classic ACRC jargon. But yeah, when you get to think about domains, I know ideally I should not refer to domains as sectors because that's what they are trying to like move away from. You can imagine the different sectors in an urban system. You think about water and sanitation, you're thinking about food systems, you're thinking about all these different things or systems for that matter. How do formal and informal interfacing, how do formal actors of formal institutions and informal actors and informal institutions sort of like interact in the governance of these different systems in urban context? So we're doing sort of like an overview analysis to sort of like see what insights can be generated from reports that were produced from the project, the city of system reports from the different cities. That's how I'm currently involved with the project. So, urban informality. So, well, I prefer using the word urban informality because, well, maybe for someone who's not familiar with that term, they may want to think of what has formerly been called slums, and we understand the baggage that comes with that word. So, but for the most part, I'm interested in urban margins, in these spaces where you'll find these uh, communities or individuals do not have adequate access to urban services or even opportunities. So I've had an interest in this for a while. For the most part, I think because of my background and the work I did, especially with the activist organization, because most of the people we were interacting with and working with, most of the the organizers we were working with came from, or rather, they called urban informal settlements home. And that kind of opened up my mind to a new world and a new reality that I was quite blind and oblivious to. Um, so yeah, as far as my research interests are concerned, I'm interested in urban informality. I'm interested in service provision in this urban informal settlement and also participatory governance. Maybe if I can start with participatory governance. My interest in that is primarily based on work I did for my master's on participatory budgeting. Um, and I feel like it sort of like dovetails quite well with what I'm doing quite now. The only thing that changes is the context. Uh, my master's project was in a peri-urban, almost rural setting in Kenya, in a county called Makueni. So as far as the what I was doing then, I was interested in how citizens and state agency or state officers sort of like collaborate in sort of like making priorities in the budgeting process. So that idea of collaborating between citizens and state, that's what I'm sort of like investigating currently with my PhD. But now perhaps under a different theme, which is co-production. Co-production essentially describes how the state or state agency or state actors collaborate with citizens in the provision of services to the citizens. Yeah. Um, yeah. Why am I interested in this? Particularly in what I'm especially looking at what, again, I think there's just stories and human beings behind some of my interest and some of the decisions I've made as far as what I want to do with my research and career. I believe it was in 2020. So some of my collaborators in an informal settlement in Kenya, in Nairobi called Madare, uh, were telling me about a certain incident. So you'll find that often in these communities, um, young people come together and form youth groups or self-help groups, and with the aim of sort of like be creating a safety net, often uh, by collaborating together to, I don't know, what would I say, for income generating activities. And one of those activities, as far as this group was concerned, was to sort of like sell water. They would like buy water and sell it. So unfortunately, they had a run-in, or rather there was some tension between this group and a certain local police officer. And as a way of punishing the group, the police officer destroyed their water infrastructure. And I thought that was the most bizarre and interesting thing because I really did not have a clue of how water works in this informal settlement. And that sort of like sparked my initial ideas on what I wanted to do for a PhD project. And yeah, so as we speak right now, I'm actually conducting fieldwork in Madara, and I have the opportunity and privilege of working in this community, talking to some of these groups and some of also the groups that are actually collaborating with the utility company, which is affiliated to the state, providing services in the community. So essentially co-production. But what I want to do is I sort of like want to problematize co-production, as we understand it, or rather politicize it in the sense that most of the literature talks about co-production in the sense that uh, organized community members engage the state to bring about a certain change within the community or to negotiate certain things which are within their interest. But what I want to do with my research is say is sort of like empirically argue that much as these community groups or these organized citizens are coming to engage state, these state-citizen relations are affected by the existing socio-political culture in this settlement. And the fact that they're also collaborating with the state, this relationship also affects the dynamics within the community. That's what I'm hoping I can bring, or rather I could contribute as far as my research is concerned. It's been great. I've been fortunate so I have existing relationships in the community, and those have been super helpful in as far as my access to the community is concerned. Also something I'm appreciating. It has been such a long time before I did extensive and field work. I'm sort of like appreciating that fieldwork skills and stamina are sort of like a muscle. If you don't exercise it, it can atrophy. Because I remember like what 6 years ago, I will do fieldwork and I'll just be there for hours, conduct interviews or do this extended focus group discussion, and also get back home, do this very flawless field reflective notes. Right now, I'm doing 2 interviews and feeling super exhausted. So I feel like I'm relearning and sort of like rebuilding my energy results as far as research work is concerned. I'm also trying out a research methodology I've never applied before. I'm trying to do a bit of social network analysis. I have no expertise in this, but I'm hoping that through my PhD, I can get to see if there's any meaningful contribution I could make through social network analysis. Essentially, what I want to do is argue again, going back to the whole idea of state-citizen collaboration, um, that these collaboration are socially embedded, and their embeddedness is also it can be represented as a social network. On one side, if you're to think about the more formal side of things, it's a social network of um, individuals representing formal institutions and how they are linked to individuals representing informal institutions. If I may describe urban informality and how it's governed as institutions. So essentially, I'm trying to pilot this method, and yeah, I hope I can do something meaningful out of it. And so far, it's been exciting because I've learned amazing stuff, and I'm also excited to see what I could reveal from social network analysis of co-produced urban services. Quite early on, when I was sort of like being introduced to the world of research, participating in the Chinese in Africa and Africans in China conference, that was a big win for me because I sort of like introduced my organization to this net. I won't say introduced. I got my organization to be a co-convener of the conference, and in 2026, and I believe that was the very first time the conference was being hosted in Africa. So I felt quite proud about that. Before joining Manchester, working for the Partnership for Social and Governance Research, I was supporting a team. I was part of a team that was implementing a pedagogical training program funded by FCDO. And when COVID hit and many universities were shutting up, we were literally perhaps one in a handful of organizations or institutions providing pedagogy capacity training on the continent, preparing lecturers to sort of like transition to blended teaching and learning. And that was amazing. It was intense work. There was so much demand. We trained like I think a little over 1,000 lecturers across the continent in a span of two or so years. It was intense, but very proud that I was involved in that process. I think that's a highlight I'm proud of. Yeah, but by far it's working with the community-based organizations for the research project. Yeah, it's that's an interesting question because I think I have an answer to that. On good weeks and bad weeks, I'm like, what in the world am I doing? Yeah. But should I say a clever way? I've been whenever I've been asked because I have family members who don't even mix. They're like, "Why are you doing this? Do you need to be doing this?" Because it feels like being a PhD student for 3 years, like you're forfeiting income for about 3 or 4 years. But so a clever way I've been responding or saying, you know what, I think I want to be a para-academic. I want to straddle the world of development practitioners and also be in academia. But to be honest, in an ideal world, I would like to explore that. I think I want to go into academia to some extent. If I can also get to perhaps teach, maybe for me it's just a bucket list thing. Perhaps it's a bucket list thing, or maybe something that can turn out to be quite fulfilling for me. I think that's something I would really like to explore. But yeah, if I can straddle both the worlds of development practice in spaces like urban development renewal, or even participatory governance or urban governance, both in practice and in research, I think that'll be a big win for me. Yeah. So I hope I can get to figure something that marries those two worlds in a very nice way.